Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
And we are recording. Rob Schreiwer, welcome to Weird Web Radio. It is awesome to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, he said thank you very stoically. Like we haven't known each other forever. Let's see. For folks who don't know you, before we get into all of this, on the back of your new book that you've got out along with Michelle Jones and Stacy Lynn Stewart, Heathen Traditions of the Pennsylvania Dutch, this says that you're a co-founder of the... Here we go. I still have a Facebook message where you and I went back forth for quite a while in audio messages trying to get me to say this right. It is the Urglaawe tradition.
Put the stress on the first syllable and you're close.
Urglaawe.
Urglaawe. Yep,
Did I do it?
Urglaawe.
All right. Everybody listening, practice. Okay. The Urglaawe tradition.
Yeah. Urglaawe, as one of the city newspapers in Philadelphia had said back in 2008, is not only the sound that a peasant's throat makes when you stab it with a spear, but but it also means the primal faith in Pennsylvania Dutch.
Oh, I love that.
The original faith in Pennsylvania Dutch. That's how we got there.
Of course it should be something weird like that, two things. But it says you're the co-founder of it within Heathenry. You're trained. There's another word I'm not sure how to pronounce. Is it Braucher?
Braucher.
That what Rob said. And the motherfucker. I can't say the things in your bio, Rob.
Hold on. Let me get my
He's gonna go get
I can't get my
book.
It's
Just
all copies are in my car from the last.
Yeah. Oh, you're good. It just said you're a trained Braucher in the
Braucher. Yep.
Oley
Freindschaft
Guild.
Yes.
And founder of the, is it Blowberic?
Robotic.
And the next word is with an F.
Freindschaft.
Of
Braucherei and Hexerei.
Man, you're awesome. It's like you've done this before. And Rob also founded, I got these, In Reach Heathen Prison Services in Philadelphia Pagan Pride Day.
Yes.
And Rob's also senior manager of Heathens Against Hate.
Right.
You're also the steer emeritus of the Troth.
And the ambassador, just like you.
And ambassador. Why is that not in there?
Because I ran out of room.
He ran out of room, folks. Before we get into all the fun stuff about you, the first question I like to ask people when they're on here the first time is, have you ever experienced a haunting or any sort of paranormal phenomena?
Let's see. Pretty much like anytime I open up all my senses other than my right ear. Yes, I have quite frequently.
Yeah. You got something really cool you can tell us about?
Other than things like visiting somebody's house and seeing a static point where you could tell that somebody had died there. In one case, I was mentioning something about how I saw this static print on the wall, and he said, "Oh," and I said, "I'm seeing somebody falling down the stairs." He said, "Oh, yeah, the guy who used to live in this house fell backward down the stairs and crashed into that wall and died." So that's why that's a fun one. Let's see another one. This one throughout my I don't even know if you know this, but I own my family's graveyard.
Okay.
It's been in our family for hundreds of years.
I knew you had a graveyard. Is this the same graveyard that you have?
We used Urglaawe stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
But ever since I was a kid, my grandfather used to talk about, and other people, like everybody else has seen this ghost who walks around asking people for where her left foot is. And so eventually my grandfather showed me where he thought it was. But after my grandfather died, his best friend showed me another place where he thought it was. And his best friend actually has relatives in the graveyard too. We're actually kind of related there. But and I never experienced this ghost until just a couple, like maybe 3 years ago. And when she came up and asked me where her left foot was, showed her both places, and nobody's ever seen her since. So,
Oh, you ruined it. No.
either here or here. Well, she was asking for it, But the suspicion is that she was a ghost who was buried in a mass grave after the Spanish flu epidemic in 1918, because there's like up to 60 bodies buried in the graveyard there that are not marked from that incident. So, but I guess we reunited her with her left foot, so there we go.
Interesting. When you said you saw her, like you saw her as the way you can see me right
No,
now.
I tend to see things in blurs in my eyes and hear things in my right ear, but it wasn't as plain as day. No, but she came across quite clearly in my ear, but and not only that, she's not the only thing. Part of Braucherei is oftentimes going into places that are haunted, or and cleansing, doing house blessings, and helping spirits cross over, helping ancestors and descendants to connect, things like that. So it's kind of comes with the job sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Braucherei is a thing that I don't think many people have heard of. In fact, locally, a friend of mine, you know her. I don't know if she wants her name out here, so I won't give it. Braucherei, in your tradition, was doing a Braucherei presentation of sorts at a local kind of conference thing, and I don't think a lot of people knew what the hell it was going to be, and you could see she was going around kind of explaining it to different people as the day was going on, leading up to her talk. All that to say, what is Braucherei? I just don't think people see that word and compute what they're looking at.
And it's really kind of funny because Braucherei is actually one of the oldest and most widespread Germanic traditions since the arrival here, and has influenced stuff up and down Appalachia, and so Braucherei, the Christian practitioners often call it powwow, which I don't like that term because it's kind of taken from the Narragansett term. But so I'm gonna now you're gonna set me off into the weeds here, right? So
let's get in the weeds, but we're gonna put a pin in that real quick because you said powwow, and I kind of recall, like way back in the 90s, wasn't Silver Ravenwolf, the witchcraft author, writing about something about powwow?
Well, she was, but she used the term hexcraft, and Silver Ravenwolf is Pennsylvania Dutch, and so she was indeed trained in the traditions. It's quite evident, and she never broke the rules that go along with getting the training. And she and I are colleagues with each other, and we share information. We actually have some crossover between our two communities. She practices in the Wiccan context. I practice in the Urglaawe context, although I was trained in syncretic, Urglaawe and Christian. But so anyway, powwow. People always assume that our ancestors were dumb for some reason. Like
why do you say that?
Well, there's
okay.
They didn't know what that the English didn't know what we were doing was different from the Native Americans. So, I guess that the English saw what you were doing and called it powwow because it looked like something that the Native Americans were doing. I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. I'm like, first off, like why would they take a Narragansett term and apply it to what we're doing when we're down here? They would take a Lenape term maybe, but not. And secondly, what we're doing and what they're doing don't look the same. So my suspicion is that the term powwow is not a borrowing of a Native American term to being applied to us. I think it actually stems from the way that a German or Pennsylvania Dutch speaker would have said the word power in English, powwow. And I think that's where it actually comes from. That somebody has the power, and so that's my suspicion. It's not proven, but that's my suspicion. But just like people always say, well, that somehow we became called Pennsylvania Dutch because because people would confuse Deutsch and Dutch. I'm like, no, that's not what happened at all. Pennsylvania Dutch is a holdover of an older meaning of the word Dutch in English, which meant any Germanic speaker from the Netherlands all the way down into Austria. It is the cognative Deutsch and Deutsch, but our ancestors knew where they came from. They did not. They knew that they didn't come from the Netherlands, although we had a long stand over there, and the Netherlands, Dutch helped us get out of Europe. But this assumption that somehow in the colonial era nobody knew who anybody was, where they kind of came from, is kind of stupid, and that is definitely applied to the use of the term powwow. And but the term powwow is used by a lot of people in English to refer to Braucherei, which Braucherei itself is. Hi. So it literally translates to very nothing. It literally means it's a kind of a combination between the customs and the needs. So we sometimes say it's like the needed customs, and it's a combination of many modalities, and it all depends on how it came down to a particular lineage. But our lineage was pretty complete, and it contains energetic healing, sympathetic healing, divination, protection, crossing over. It was a widespread practice well into the 20th century, until it had to kind of go underground when the anti-German hysteria began to hit, because prior to World War One. And then between the wars, it made it stick even harder. Ironically, after World War II, it began to kind of come back a little bit. But and then there's Hexerei, which is, depending on where you grow up, it means something different in Pennsylvania Dutch. Where I grew up, Braucherei and Hexerei were viewed as two sides of the same coin, with like Braucherei being like good and Hexerei being bad. But now that I'm a practitioner of both, and I've gone through the communities throughout Pennsylvania and some other states and the province of Ontario, to our communities, I can say that Hexerei is not the way that it appears in the public mind, because it's being defined by its enemies. It's being defined by Christians who consider it satanic and things like that. Instead, the way we've come to view it, and I kind of wish that I had Michelle's quote right, the one that we actually came up with as a guild, but we tend to look at Braucherei as like the outward and broad healing and tradition to help enable community, empower community, and Hexerei is a deep dive into oneself, to understand oneself and to increase one's own power without a moral judgment of whether that's good or bad. It's ultimately what you do with either one of them that makes that different, that distinguishing factor between good and evil. So we actually, in Silver Raven Wolf's group and I have actually interfaced on this sort of thing, and we kind of function pretty similarly in that regard now. The old standing belief within Braucherei itself, as it came down through my lineage, is that Braucherei can be practiced within the faith system of any religion, any spiritual system, except for the lack of a spiritual system, because there has to be somewhere that you're getting that energy from. So it's okay to practice in Wicca. It's okay to practice in Urglaawe. It's okay to practice in Christianity. The only one that's actually trying to keep other people from practicing within it are some Christians who are saying, well, it's a Christian practice, but it's not, though. I mean, I believe that it's connected either directly to or adjacent to the Merseburg charms from pre-Christian Germanic cultures. The two Merseburg charms sound very much like Braucherei prayers. They come off very similar, and I don't know if that's directly related to it, but I would say it's the same general concept. And so, did I confuse anybody yet?
I don't know. It's just you and I right now, and I'm following along just fine. Okay. What I'm hearing is Braucherei and Hexerei are more a set of techniques than they are a belief system.
You're correct. They're not a belief system per se, but without belief in something, they're not going to work.
Gotcha.
And but also back prior to the rise of modern medicine and big pharma, these were the doctors and nurses, or I should just say the doctors of our villages. And every village seemed to have one or two people who practice this, oftentimes maybe more, out in the countryside, and that would be where they would get their medicine from. Their herbal remedies, everything. came from the Braucher or the Braucherin or the Powwow or the Hexerei practitioner, however they look at it, because parts of Pennsylvania, they use Hexerei they use the word Hexerei for both Braucherei and Hexerei as we see it. So the variants of Pennsylvania Dutch also determine how people looked at it, but we make that distinguishment again, above and outward and deep and inward between Braucherei and Hexerei within our guild's work.
Now, I get asked sometimes that if because we live near a large Amish settlement here, if Pennsylvania Dutch refers specifically to Amish people, that's not quite accurate, is it?
A square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not always a square. So the Amish are one relatively small segment of the Pennsylvania Dutch. The vast majority of Pennsylvania Dutch are ultimately not of sectarian background. The Mennonites are the largest of the sectarians. The Brethren there are more Brethren than there are Amish, and most people never even heard of them. And they're actually the second largest of the Anabaptist groups, and they got plain people just like the Amish and Mennonites do. But the Amish and Mennonites together probably make up 10% or less of the entire Pennsylvania Dutch population. So,
oh wow, that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So Pennsylvania Dutch is a much broader term than what people think it is. Then.
It's an ethnic group. It's a fairly large ethnic group, and actually quite a large ethnic group, especially when you combine in German Americans who kind of fell in between. The way we tend to look at it is that if your ancestors arrived in any port in North America, within the British or even French colonies at this point, particularly in Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York, Charleston, and New Orleans, then they may never even have set. If they came from the Germanic lands and they settled, even if they never made it to Pennsylvania, that's the Pennsylvania Dutch migration. And so those communities are considered to be ours, even if they never came to Pennsylvania. But that prior to the War of 1812. The War of 1812 had a little disruption, and some people would take it up to even to 1820. Like 1820 is kind of like the division between German American and Pennsylvania Dutch. I usually say the War of 1812 myself, but 1820 is also a common breaking point. So,
so it's kind of an ethnic group, I suppose, and is viewed in that sort of diaspora sort of way in America.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's very interesting. I just wonder, because some of these terms, you don't hear them all the time outside of certain areas. So I don't think when people encounter them, they know exactly maybe what it's talking about. Like I said, I know when a lot of people see it, they associate it with Amish.
Right. Well, Amish are the most visible because of, first off, they're a tourist attraction. Well, they are. I mean, Lancaster County has built its entire tourist industry on Amish and Mennonite culture. Well, there's a whole wider Pennsylvania Dutch experience out there. Same foodstuffs, lots of historical things. I mean, there's a lot to see that were brought about by people who are Pennsylvania Dutch who are not Amish and Mennonite. So I mean, it's
yeah.
But
it's funny you say that, because Arthur, Illinois, is the large Amish settlement near me I'm talking about, and when I go there periodically, for food or a festival or the pumpkin patch, things like that, for me, it always just kind of feels like I'm heading towards an Amish amusement park kind of thing. I don't know. That's what it feels like sometimes.
See, when Lancaster County isn't that far from here, and I grew up in Berks County, which is right next to Lancaster County, and going to Lancaster County to me feels like going home. Not specifically the Amish, obviously, because I didn't grow up Amish, but the Mennonite and the just general other Pennsylvania Dutch that are not Amish or sectarian. That to me is my culture. So driving through the towns and looking at them, and you'll find very similar towns up in areas that are not settled by sectarians much at all. Brethren and Mennonite tend to fit in a little bit more. That people don't always necessarily know that they have a large community there, but they're there. I mean, I went to a Brethren school. Nobody really thinks of things that way, but and so it's a pretty large ethnic group that people aren't even aware of. And a lot of it, what also always astounds me is that when I come across people who will say something to me like, "Oh yeah, my grandparents were Pennsylvania Dutch." Yeah, which side? Oh, all of them. Well, what does that make you? Or when I see things like Pennsylvanians in the past tense, like they Pennsylvania Dutch were. It's like, hello, I mean, but some of that is also a holdover of that anti-German hysteria from the early 20th century, and also the fact that the language was discriminated against even into my lifetime, and so it's which is something that really irritates me even today. But and that your accent will be a hindrance, so you got to go and reduce it, things like that, and that's all true stuff. But as long as I'm alive, the language isn't going to die, and as long as I'm alive, the culture is not going to die. And the culture is different from just like it's an ethnic culture, just like everybody else's.
Sure.
So
yeah, it's one thing that I find it ironic when I think about it because my mom's dad was Amish, born Amish. Him and all of his brothers and sisters, they all left the Amish.
What does that make
church.
you?
I'm not. I've never been in their church. I've never been Amish.
Yeah, but if your dad was Amish and he was Pennsylvania Dutch, so
no, my grandfather, right? So I guess that would throw me in the Pennsylvania Dutch group.
Yes, it would. Surprise.
Because through ancestry, we know the Amish folks kept very meticulous records. Anyway, long story short, I have always found this kind of an interesting thing about my own heathenry because of the troth moot in Pennsylvania where I was ordained as clergy. And I recognized it during the ordination ceremony in that I have an ancestor who came out of that area as one of the leaders of an Amish community that came to found Arthur, their community. And there I was returning back to that area all these years later to be officially ordained as clergy in heathenry.
Yes.
I found that very, very just kind of ironic and strange in my own personal history.
Well, I mean, it's not that much different from my ordination while I was still steer of the troth, which took place at my family's graveyard, which used to be, which used to have a brethren church on it. And with Mennonite ancestors on the one side, Lutherans on the other, and but it's becoming heathen clergy right there, and having some people who have died within our community in an area that's designated for Urglaawe, and that's the way these things are going to work. I mean, we have to eventually. We have to eventually, begin to create these institutions and these places for ourselves because, I mean, so few of us can really afford to have a temple, but we may have somewhere else that we can actually go to and make sacred within our own traditions. And that's what my family's graveyard is turning into. I'm keeping the area where all the Christians are buried. That's there. I'm not gonna mess with them. But on the other side, where it's either empty, and just gotta make sure that none of those bodies from the Spanish flu, but they're all unmarked and like it kind of left to be forgotten. So bring them up and adopt them into our group if we have to. But I would like to have some sort of memory. I have to get the land survey to find out where all those bones are. I mean, I know at least where a foot was, but
two possible places.
Well, they're not that far from each other. So.
I do find it interesting that you are talking about having interest in locating these forgotten and lost people, because you have a thing you do every year about the forgotten and lost, like deities and things.
Yeah.
I forget what you call that, but could you unpack that a little bit and talk about it?
So I don't remember exactly what set me off on it. I think I was doing research on something, one topic, and then it brought me. You know me, I like I just start following whatever shiny object is.
Yes, you
But
are the living embodiment of squirrel and human being.
yes, if you wait long enough, the squirrels will show up at my front door here. But uh, and I began to read about. Actually, I have one of the books right here. You know, this is the sequel to the conversion of the Teutonic race, Saint Boniface and the conversion of Germany. And so this is like a Catholic Church record here, and in there they're talking all about how Saint Boniface was going through various parts of the German lands and how he destroyed the Thor's Oak. And he's the one who destroyed this, who is credited with taking down the Thor's Oak, as everybody else just kind of sat there and watched. They leave out the whole having an army with him to do this,
Mhm.
and then going on and parading through and destroying one shrine after another. I'm like thinking to myself as I'm reading this for whatever I was researching, I'm like, hey, this is religious terrorism. Like this is actual terrorism, and and so I was reading about some of the other deities, and it is possible that some of these deities might have been invented by the church, or these shrines might have been invented by the church to make him sound more like he did more than he did or something. But the oak itself is bad enough, especially
Mhm.
building churches on top of the land that they essentially just stole. And so, and thinking about this also, as we do with how Native American shrines ended up, becoming stolen and having churches built on them and things like that. It's a pattern. And so, uh, somewhere several years ago, I thought, well, why don't we have an observance that honors the deities whose shrines were desecrated, and so we came up with the observance of the desecrated shrines. And I began to realize it's because this is something that many of the pagan religions and, outside of our concept of pagan, but also like Native American and other religious throughout the world have been essentially terrorized into losing their sacred spots by whatever dominant religion or force had come in and taken those areas over. So it's like we all face the same challenges. Our religions may be very different, but we face the challenge of having to deal with the potential threat of having our religious shrines destroyed, or having our religion suppressed or oppressed, or and martyrdom is not necessarily a thing of the past, and
Mhm.
it's so every year on June 5th, which is St. Boniface Day, we hold this observance of the desecrated shrines. This year I had to move it into July because of my surgery, um, but and Ben Kowalski Greg had this current steersman of the troth had made a suggestion that we also look at it as the restoration of these. I'm like, yes, that is the goal. And some of these deities we now regularly incorporate into Urglaawe understanding. We don't always necessarily know what they were known for in the past, but we're trying to build our own relationships with them today.
Mhm.
Inklings, and sometimes the Catholic Church gives us information that actually helps us rebuild the relationship. So, like, while they're bragging about it, they're actually providing us with information that we don't necessarily have otherwise. And this is one I would really like to see become a bigger, event every year in June. For some reason, I guess that's because we're getting close to the end of the school year, and as a school teacher, I'm like sloughing through just trying to make it to the end of it. But that we actually, share more about across traditions about recognizing religious terrorism for what it is, because we don't really comment too much, at least not from the perspective of Europeans, about how the church like just went through and destroyed shrines and temples and stuff, and there was never really an accountability for what happened there, and how we today have to be a little bit more diligent and diligent and vigilant without letting it become our operational control, about not letting this stuff happen again. And
Mhm.
that's where we're kind of stuck, is because on a national level we're seeing Christian nationalism becoming a threat to a whole lot of things, and we just saw a whole bunch of religions, including some of our own, getting stripped from the U.S. military's chaplaincy lists and everything, and that's where history could repeat itself. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
hopefully, that made sense. But that's the concept behind the observance of the desecrated shrines.
You're doing great.
Catch us on June 5th next year.
Yeah. I think that's great. It's something that you've done for as long as I've known you, is what my memory is telling me. And I've participated in my way. And it's just something I love that you have brought that into people's awareness. I think it's important.
And again, it underscores the fact that our religions may be very different, but the challenges that we face are very much the same. And if we stand together and work together and network together, we might have an easier time facing some of those challenges and surmounting them. So,
I agree. So you didn't just arrive in the world as a heathen or a pagan or anything. What happened? What happened that made you decide I'm a heathen? What was that like?
All right, so being being gay, growing up and in the church and throughout my Mennonite adulthood, I never felt 100% comfortable with the messages I was hearing about who I was versus what the religion held as dear, and it's just trying to settle that. It just didn't make sense. A lot of things about Christianity, not just that, but a lot of things about Christianity just didn't make sense. Like, accept the word of our loving God, or He will smite you. It's like, and that he's very jealous and possessive, and it really kind of sounds like a toxic relationship, very much narcissistic and toxic.
Mm-hmm.
He builds you so that you can honor him and make him feel good about himself, and then he sends his son down. It just didn't make sense, and I had a lot of trouble actively denying that. But again, growing up with one foot in the plain culture, one foot in the fancy culture, and knowing so much about, and just being so interested in keeping my language alive, that exploring more about our culture and putting things together, and I began to question things, and then I this is not in a cuckoo way, but I began to sense that I was hearing the call of multiple deities. And so in 2007, my parents had a house down in Naples, Florida, like a snowbird house. But in September of 2007, my partner and I went down there just to go on a small vacation. And this is when I was really rumbling this stuff over in my head, officially. I had already begun to really question a lot of things, but I really didn't know what to do. So
did your parents know you were gay at that time?
Oh yeah, they know.
Okay.
Yeah, my partner and I have been together since 1989. But so the multiple deities thing, I was like, well, the only religion that I really knew to have multiple gods was Hinduism. So went off to the only bookstore that I knew of in Naples, Florida, and bought a book. Like, essentially, it's probably here somewhere. It wasn't called this exactly. It was like Hinduism for Dummies, kind of.
That's you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, it's not the title of it, but I'm sure it's here somewhere. But and the author was of a Norwegian descent, and so as I was reading it, she mentioned Asatru for the first time. And so I read through that book and everything. I was curious about Asatru, and so I thought, well, Scandinavian, Germanic, maybe a little bit closer. So I ordered Diana Paxton's Essential Asatru, and when I got back home, it was here already. And so I began to read this, and that's when the brick finally hit me. It's like, oh my God, the helpful entities from Braucherei, they're the old German gods. and they don't specifically name them as gods and goddesses in the Christian Braucherei, the syncretic that I was learning, but it was quite obvious. And so I was like, wait a minute, that means we have this relationship with these deities that's still alive within our healing practices, and or alive in a different form. I'm not sure whether it's continuous or not. Actually, to me, it doesn't matter. But so I began to look into that stuff, and and was searching in various Yahoo groups and things from the time. And that's when Patricia Niedrich, whom I credit for being the other co-founder of Urglaawe, pulled me into this Yahoo group called Hexenkunst, which she had taken over.
Say that again.
Hexenkunst, which means the art of sorcery.
Okay. I like that. I like the translation a lot. No.
But it would be Hexekunst in Pennsylvania Dutch, but it was Hexenkunst, which is German. But she brought me into that because she had taken over that group or inherited that group just a few months before, and she had only recently discovered that her birth father was Pennsylvania Dutch, and so she was beginning to develop an interest in that. And so in that process, there were already a lot of people in that group who were very much interested in this stuff or knew a lot about it, including my future Braucherei mentor was in there. My future herbalism mentor was in that group. And so when Patricia brought me in there, there's several people who are still active within the Urglaawe community, are parts of the Urglaawe community and Braucherei community, including some people that that who were there when we finally, because my original intention was, we have a lot of lore that we might be able to add to the knowledge of Asatru. But then I was thinking to myself, it's not going to work because we have an entire, we have our own freaking everything here. Plus, we're a living culture, it's still alive. And it's like the two are similar, but they're not the same. And so somewhere in November of 2007, that's when we decided to give this whole thing a name of its own and establish it as its own, entity. And that's where Patricia suggested the translation of it, and I came up with the name of it, of Urglaawe. And so that's how Urglaawe got named, and off of discussions and research that I had done, and then I entered the Braucherei training, and the rest is all history. So, So it was, a lot of it was my research and Patricia's name suggestion, her guidance. So the two of us I look at as co-founders, but really in a lot of ways it was a community founded thing also, because there were people in that Hexenkunst Yahoo group who were also giving their experiences early on, and some of them served as the basis for the first interviews that I actually had done of people who were in the community. Now, my Braucherei grandfather, whose name was Dennis Boyer, he wrote a book called Once Upon a Hex, and that's one that
I love that.
Anybody who's interested in this stuff might want to get that book. So it's Dennis Boyer.
It's still out there?
I'm sure they can acquire it somewhere, but Dennis Boyer's Once Upon a Hex, and he had done interviews with, I think, 80 practicing Brauchers, mostly elderly, and gleaned information from them, and some of it not so Christian. My Braucherei mentor, Jessie Tobin, and her husband, Matthew Sicker, had done 8 more. And then I started doing the interviews while I was still an apprentice. As of last Sunday's Conjure Fest, I picked up my 177th interview. So those interviews served as a major part of the tradition, because these people knew oral tradition, they knew experiential tradition within Braucherei and Hexerei that were not written anywhere. These were not the books. These were this is what the meat of the things, how people related to the mountains, how people related to the skies, to the water, to everything about how a rather animistic heathen tradition became organized. In other words, Urglaawe itself is new. The word is a neologism that we made up in 2007, but it's the organization of a lot of very old things. Mm-hmm. People who were nominal Christians but still were doing a lot of things that their churches would not have approved of, or they identified as Christian or really were Christian, but they still knew this scrap of lore, that scrap of lore, whatever. And the hardest part was to try to isolate anything that was not. She's about to throw up. Don't throw up, all right? Like I said,
the cat.
I said usually there's at least one cat barf during this whole thing, but I think she's just a hairball burp. But no, but Here, a second, so you can chop that other part out with this.
You're
The,
fine.
the organization of these things is critical, but the hardest to separate were the things that were of Gnostic origin, because Gnostic origin and heathen origin oftentimes, like the things that were flat out Christian, were pretty easy to recognize.
What do you mean by Gnostic origin then? So
Well,
everyone knows what we're talking about.
within Braucherei, the Gnostics, the one of the competitors of Christianity early on, but the Gnostic traditions, a lot of that some of their philosophies ended up in Braucherei. And sometimes there was conflation with the Gnostic Sophia, with the goddess Hola, things like that. And so eventually we just took what we had and recognized that, we don't 100% know where some of this stuff came from. Did it come from somebody's exploration of some Greek tradition way long ago, or was this an old Germanic holdover? We didn't always have that information. So we just accepted in 2011, I'm sorry, what we had was what we had. And stopped worrying about whether, detailing whether or not what the ultimate source of it was, because it was already part of our culture anyway. But most of it, I believe, was of Germanic origin anyway. But so Urglaawe became its own thing, and began to really resonate with people, not just the Pennsylvania background, because one thing we're not worried about the bloodlines. We're not worried about all that stuff. We are not folkish. Even though recently Stephen Flowers, Edward Thorson said that, that was accused me, made a comment about me being folkish because I was building a tradition from my folk culture. Like that's not the same.
That's not the same thing.
Which folkishness, we've never been folkish. Pennsylvania Dutch have always been an amalgamation of many different peoples that just happen to have, similar language and similar culture that comes together as one. So,
okay, you talked about the interviews, like what you guys were doing. That is fascinating. I don't think you all are giving yourselves enough credit for what you've done. I mean, you've essentially done the work of what I think they're called an ethnographer in folklore studies. I mean, you've captured and preserved a real part of human history, and that's amazing that you guys have done that. That takes work and dedication.
It does, but it's not all these interviews were big fancy ones. I mean, it's oftentimes
they don't have to be.
Yeah, oftentimes like a sliver, and the community was, on the whole, very protective about their identities, especially the Hexerei practitioners, because they didn't want their neighbors saying, "Oh, well, I heard that she was interviewed because she's a witch," and she, that stuff. Well, like these people are very old. Most of them are probably dead now, and they were worried that the holdover from what happened to them in their lifetime, and the perspectives that were put upon them by the enemies of Hexerei ran pretty deep. And when I first got started with the Hexerei community, I didn't even begin to interview people who identified as Hexerei practitioners until 2011 or 2010, somewhere in there. I had to get like vouchers from somebody. Like they had to know that I knew somebody that they knew that they could trust in order for them to talk to me. And what got me in the door was the fact that I could speak to them in Pennsylvania Dutch. And like some of these things, like they literally would give me a slip of paper with a stamp or a mark or something on there that I had to take and show this person, but it's just kind of funny how all that worked, because like the association that people have with Hexerei and Satanism, only all the people I've interviewed who identified as a Hexerei practitioner even believed in Satan and didn't want nothing to do with him because he was Abrahamic. So I mean, like, and we learned a lot of lore from them, and
that's very cool.
And the interviews continue. Like last Sunday was a small thing, but there was somebody who came to ConjureFest, and she was a medium who had experienced certain things on our world tree that made up part of the lore from Hexerei. So I was able to mark her down as a 177th interview. I have to contact her and fill that one out a little bit. But
that's cool. Very cool. All right, cool. I said cool like 5 times right there.
Cool.
Cool.
Glatt. Smooth. Glatt. You got the glatt. Smooth.
Yeah. I'm just kind of looking at the clock and thinking about where we want to go next. I have told the story from my perspective when I've been interviewed on other shows, and I've brought it up periodically when it's appropriate, of a shared memory you and I definitely have. The Troth Moot, the Troth Moot in was it Maryland, when we decided we were going to get rid of the Loki ban in the Troth.
2018.
Yeah, I remember it. I mean, because it was just wild how it all happened. But one of the key points for me was like being a part of the Troth. It wasn't like I was handed something that said, and oh, by the way, you can't worship Loki in our official spaces. I was never told that. And then getting onto the board of directors, like that was one of the first moments that I knew it was a thing, was when I saw all those people leaving during Grand Sumble to go off to do their own thing. And I asked you, like, why are so many people leaving? and you just basically caught me up on like, this is the problem and this is stupid, and, and so on.
Plus actually we'll go back to that in a second. But all right, so being of a tradition that doesn't have Loki in the lore, although we do have a similar figure named Shada, but I never had a stake in that game, and why people are so upset about it. But over time, during my tenure on the Reed, there were a lot of people, including on the Reed, who had no issue with the hailing of Loki and everything, and it was more, I swear, that it was painted out to be a bigger problem than it actually was. But as time went on, it became a bigger problem because there were more people in the Troth who were comfortable recognizing Loki, and they were the ones who weren't comfortable weren't the ones who were coming to Troth Moot. So so I believe it was Troth Moot 2018. I think that's one of
it was. There was one in Maryland.
Yes, it was one in Maryland, and I will never forget that time because this had already been something that I'd been considering in my mind anyway, just from people in the community who either were Lokians or were comfortable hailing Loki. Just from but not to mention the fact that my associate steer was Gary Farmer, who was a Lokian, and I respect and love Gary to death. I mean, like the
same.
So, like the kind of thing of just trying to figure out why this is the way that it is. It was to build this big tent for but where were all the people who were in that big tent on the other side? I just remember sitting there. We had we had a really good like Sega or bloat round, and then we were in the Sumble rounds. I have to switch to the terminology of us. And then somewhere around the second round, that's when the Loki Vey, which we had already negotiated that. Remember that we had negotiated during, I think, 2016 or 2017, negotiated allowing for Loki shrines to be built at Troth Moot, but still not the hailing of Loki officially. Like it would have to be done at the Loki shrine, and which that part did not make sense to me. It was a baby step, I guess, but it didn't make sense. It's like, if we're going to allow the Vey or the shrine, or as we would call it, Urglaawe, then why are we not just allowing this to happen?
I know, it's so silly.
It was silly, but and also because in 2017 was Frith Forge over in Europe. Okay, I don't know if everybody knows this part, but Frith Forge over in Germany, in Europe, they hail Loki without all this baggage that we have here. And so if you may or may not remember that prior to Frith Forge, there were a lot of Europeans who were concerned that the Americans were planning on coming over there and telling them how to do it, how to do this, that, and thing. And we were most assuredly not, until one day it dawned on me, hold on a second. We're sponsoring this event. The Troth is sponsoring this event, and Loki cannot be hailed at any Troth sponsored event. So now we're going to go over there and tell them that they can't hail Loki because this is a Troth sponsored event. Would be going over there and telling them what not to do in this case. And I was like, that can't wash. And that's when, thankfully, the Verein, the Alliance for Germanic Heathenry in Heimo, Gravenstein, they also co-sponsored the event. So everybody else at this event would be under their thew, while Diana, Amanda, and I would be under the Troth. And which was really kind of stupid, but otherwise the entire event could have been destroyed by that ban, because we would have had to say, well, we're sponsoring the event and our rules say that we can't hail Loki at our event. So guess what? Even though you all hail Loki freely, and many of you I do it regularly, you can't do it anymore. Like, I mean, that just would have been really, really awful. And so I'm very grateful to Heimo for taking on co-sponsoring that. And plus, he on the ground, he, as being a local, he was able to get so much done for us. But so we went over to that event, and I had to tell Diana, Amanda was fine, but Diana, hey, she was like, well, can we hail along with the others? Like, no, we can't hail Loki at all at this. We are bound by our own rules, and that part kind of sucked. And I understood. I was sitting there thinking to myself, this is ridiculous. That was the first real hit. Like, they have no problem with this. But here we are, limited. We can't even join them in their hail in this Frith Forge, this community, because of this rule, and nobody here would have had an issue with it. So, right? So we came back, and that fateful Troth moot that summer, watching all those people walk out of the room from a great sumble. And that was really bothering me. And I was like, this is crazy. Here we are now split into two groups, with the larger group actually having left, and this is where where it all began. I said, I'm looking around this room, and everybody who's left in here, I am the one who would probably be the least likely to be comfortable saying, "Hail Loki." And as soon as those two words fell from my lips, that's when that transformer issue started throughout the campground. With the flash, remember that, with the flashing?
All the lights turned into like strobe lights. The whole fucking campground for the rest of the time we were there.
And I don't know if you remember, I almost had a conniption because I thought that I had hailed Loki. And I said, no, I just said hail Loki. I didn't mean hail Loki. But it just went like crazy. And it was after that whole thing that I realized, what, this is destructive, because where were all the people who were demanding not to hail Loki at Troth events? Why weren't they at the Troth events then? They weren't there, and so that's when we took that poll of how members feel about it and right. What to do about it. And I know that a lot of the Lokians in the Troth were really worried about it not passing, the bid to undo that ban. And I was like, no, that's going to pass. And it passed with almost 90%. And with the 10 years, we owed Loki from the 2008 to the 2018 bylaws. We owed him 10 years of in the forefront Loki bloats at Troth Moot and all that stuff. And I think it worked out for the better. Our membership had grown tremendously, and it was the right thing to do.
I agree.
And so, but it was very bizarre, and then it also led to election results that I was happy with, because somebody left the organization, and there were a lot of things that was a tough time, and but I wanted to be done in 2019. I wanted to be out, but then 2020 brought me back in because of an issue with that followed me. This year, who succeeded me, even though I really don't know all of that what happened there. But unfortunately, I also got COVID in that time, and I had it worse than I realized even at the time. But undoing that Loki ban was the best thing that we could have done, because it wasn't serving our members well, and it just wasn't. It wasn't the right thing. It wasn't. ethically. It wasn't ethically right. And the members should be able to do what they want. So we just empowered the people who are running the rituals to decide who can and can't be held at the rituals, and that's a far better thing than trying to micromanage everybody else's beliefs. So
Yeah, I always remember that time like wild and just crazy how it went, and so I'm proud to have been part of the group that finally got rid of that dumb rule. But I do want to recognize you as like at a time when inclusive heathenry needed someone to really put a foot down and stand on business. You and your leadership style came along at the right time.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you get recognition for some of that, because without you at that time in those places, I don't know what, like, the truth, for sure, what it would even look like today. But inclusive heathenry itself just needed someone with great leadership skills and compassion to hear people at the same time. And there you were. So I, for one, want to say gratitude, my friend.
I appreciate that. That's a very high compliment, and I did try my best to make sure that I was understanding what I was hearing from all sorts of sectors. But exclusionary heathenry is very dark, and we don't need that. We need the inclusion is where the brightness and the joy is, and just letting people enjoy their lives of their spirituality and be who they want to be. And it's just, I'm glad that we made it through that era. That was a tough time, but
yeah,
I'm very proud of the work that we did, and that high read was an exceptional group of people. So, and you were on that. There you go. So.
Hell yeah, I was. No, I'm the one that made it pretty. I didn't do anything all that difficult.
Yeah, come on, man.
Yeah.
And Gary's one who made
it. Yeah.
Gary's the one who made it. In your face, truce. You got to accept, but with a golden smile.
Yes, big shout out to Gary. Gary is one of my favorite humans I have ever met, for sure. I guess we've come to a good point to start wrapping up the regular portion. Is there anything that I didn't bring up? Anything you want to get into? The floor is yours.
No, there's nothing in particular. I mean, because again, you drop a subject, I can usually talk about it for 20 minutes. So
I know you're fantastic at telling stories.
Whether it makes sense or not at the end is up to your listeners to decide. But
yeah. So if people want to find you, the things you do, your book, let's give them all the details. Where do they go?
Well, the book can be found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or on Llewellyn. It's the Heathen Traditions of the Pennsylvania Dutch, an Urglaawe primer, or primer. I'm never sure how to say that word in English.
I say primer.
I say primer too, but I hear other people saying primer. Like, well, there should be 2 M's in primer. But
well, they're wrong. No.
It's a Llewellyn publication, and it's actually been selling very surprisingly well. I'm actually very happy with it. But with my co-authors of Michelle Jones and Stacy Lynn Stewart, and you find me on Facebook under Robert L. Schreiwer. Facebook is where we have our most active Urglaawe online community. If you're in the area that you can make it to the Trenton or Philadelphia areas, we have every month we have our pub moot at the King George Inn in Bristol, second Wednesdays. You can contact me on Facebook about that, and we're pretty open with our rituals most of the time. So the Urglaawe community on Facebook is very active. It's an Urglaawe Facebook group just called Urglaawe, capital Urglaawe, and where else?
Heathens Against Hate.
What's that?
Heathens Against Hate.
Oh, Heathens Against Hate. Oh, yeah. Heathens Against Hate. We could always use more people, in different areas, standing up for the rights under our banners, recognize that heathens exist and that we are people who are standing up for inclusion and for people's rights. We have a great team. Misha Nicolaisen and Garrett White have really helped to bolster our roles and our presence with that. So heathensagainst.hate.com. You can actually download literature from there, download things that you can use at protests and information sheets and stuff you can get printed out. We've begun having representatives in various areas, mostly coming from Pagan Pride Day leadership. A lot of the people who lead a Pagan Pride Day will also take on the role of being a local HAH contact. And this coming Saturday is August 1st. I don't know when this is going to come out, but
soon.
Northeast PA Pagan Pride Day is this coming Saturday in Wilkes-Barre, and we'll be up there. So we'll be up there talking.
Nice. Excellent. Love all that. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. This is way, way, way overdue. So thank you. And for everybody listening, thank you as always for listening to the show. Please, if you enjoyed this, please share it with all your network, your family, your friends. Rate and thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. If you want to hear the rest of this interview, you're going to have to go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. All right, folks, stay weird out there, my friends. Welcome to bonus audio time, Rob. It is now time for all the morbid stuff. Are you ready?
Sure, why not?
All right, first question is always the same for people who haven't been here before. What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit, and why? And they can be famous for any reason. This doesn't have to be some Hollywood celebrity. Just famous for you and to you.
I think I've already actually done it. So,
yeah, who is that?
It's somebody that we should in our Braucherei guild be annually doing a pilgrimage to. That's the tradition.
Oh, wow.
It's on private land now, so.
Do you want to hear how they just answered that question? What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? That and many others, including what they think about the afterlife, what they may or may not do in cemeteries, what are their traditions and magical practices that have to do with the dead, folklore that surrounds their homes, and so much more, available for only $5. $5 a month. Even if I make more than one episode in a month, it's still just $5 a month at patreon.com/weirdwebradio or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. You can find me on Instagram at weirdwebradio. You can find me on Facebook as Weird Web Radio, or come join the new, fun, and exciting Weird Web Radio Facebook group. Thank you again for being here. Stay weird out there, my friends.